The Downtown Rams podcast is brought to you by Rams on Demand, Seat Giant, Vibe 305, and RWO, Rams World Order. Now enjoy the show.
Down the middle to the end zone. Caught by Brandon Cooks. Shoot your arrows. It picks. Nickel Roby Coleman throws. End zone caught. Touchdown. Tyler Higbee. Cooper Kupp plucks it out of the air and gives the Rams the lead. LaMarcus Joyner returns to the lineup with an interception in London. 35-30. Robert Woods, first down 20. 10-5. Touchdown. LA! No, it's Goff who keeps it. And Goff goes crashing into the end zone. Aaron Donald almost beat the football there and comes away with his third sack of the afternoon. Met immediately and sacked. Corey Littleton, have yourself a day. And he gets gobbled up. Savage has to eat it as Michael Brockers picks up the sack. He's decked by Ebukam. Picked off. Marcus Peters strutting his stuff. Mark Barron the last 4 weeks has been a Pro Bowler. He picked off Dak Prescott into Seattle territory, into the clear. 30, 20, Farrell Cooper 10. Farrell Cooper at the goal line.
Cousins sacked. Ndamukong Suh. Of all the guys, it's the rookie John Franklin Myers who knocks it out of Cousins' right hand.
Todd Gurley, 20, 10. Gurley for MVP. Touchdown LA.
Welcome back to the Downtown Rams podcast. It's episode 139, and it is the special podcast. It is the podcast after the Rams have now gone back-to-back with winning the NFC West. We all know this is a Super Bowl caliber team, but you got to at least, as Sean McVay put it in his post-game, little spiel, you got to check the boxes, you got to enjoy that moment first, and then move on to the next step. Never take a moment lightly, and that's what the Rams certainly aren't going to do. They, as I would put it, Joe, they scoot by the Detroit Lions 30-16. Oh, by the way, I have my buddy Joe Curley on again, so that's 2 for 1. And we're excited to talk a little bit about this game for you.
Yeah, what's up, guys? Congratulations to all Rams fans around the country and beyond for what has been about a generation since you've had a team that's gone back-to-back. So not bad for a team that was just 4-12 in the basement of the NFC West and a complete floundering joke upon its initial arrival to Los Angeles. So how much have things changed since 2016? So hope you guys are enjoying it.
Well, it's definitely weird, Joe, because, I was texting you throughout this game, and I was texting Blaine, and I'm obviously sitting there with my father, and I was aggravated pretty much the entire game.
I don't know how you could be aggravated. You called it. You were right. I was the one that said that they should blow this team out from the beginning and be able to bench their starters, and you were the one that said it was going to be tight and that they'd pull away at the end, and that's exactly what happened. So take a little credit.
Yeah, and I know that, but I wasn't expecting it to be the way it was. So I know it sounds weird, but I first want to give a shout-out to Todd Gurley, who, just came back from, there was such this monumental win for the Rams, beating the Chiefs 54-51, biggest Monday Night Football game probably ever. And Todd Gurley received a lot of flack, or whatever you want to call it, for not really being part of the offense. I mean, you score 54 points, and he didn't have any touchdowns or anything like that. I think he had like 70-ish yards.
Defense,
but he was banged up.
Touchdowns.
Yeah, Samson was taking them from him.
I got a buddy of mine who always complains about the defense. He's like, they just gave up 51 points. I'm like, they scored 2 touchdowns. Take it off their tab.
Yeah. We should start doing that.
Yeah.
That's a really good point.
Take it off their tab. Point differential. Anyway, keep going. Sorry.
Yeah. No, it was all facts, Joe. Don't apologize for just stating the facts.
Can't apologize for facts.
But the fact of the matter is this: Todd Gurley came out today, 23 carries, 132 yards, 2 touchdowns. In case you don't have a calculator or anything like that, that's a 5.7 yards per carry average, which I will say this, yards per carry can be a little
overrated,
misconstrued. Mm-hmm. It's an overrated stat. Although when describing LeGarrette Blount, it absolutely shows what LeGarrette Blount is, but we won't go into that. So, no, the thing that I really liked about today for Todd Gurley is that, albeit he only had 132 yards, which sounds funny, he only had 2 touchdowns, which also sounds funny because he's had 4 this year in a game. He only had 23 carries, but man, it just seems like the more and more I watch Todd, and I'm actually seeing this with Ezekiel Elliott when I was watching the Thursday Night Football game. Todd Gurley has changed his approach, and he is so good about when, you have a 3rd and short situation. I mean, you and I both watch baseball, Joe. You know how, the count, when you're down in the count, you have to shorten up your swing, just try to put the ball in play. Well, with Todd Gurley, he changes his, he could easily, on one of the plays, it was 3rd and 1, they needed a first down to extend the drive. And Todd Gurley, quote unquote, shortened up his swing, or rather, changed the way he ran. He could have run more upright and tried to sprint right through the hole and get go for the big time play, the home run. But I saw that multiple times, 3rd and short, or, goal to go, and he's, trying to just take care of business. And that's one thing I've noticed from this year's Todd Gurley as opposed to the years past Todd Gurley. Another thing, as you brought up on Twitter, Todd Gurley had kind of a rough showing against the Lions last time. Mm-hmm. We all know Case Keenum had 4 touchdowns passing, but unfortunately, even though he threw the interception, it wasn't really Case Keenum's fault they lost. I mean, he threw 4 touchdowns. What it came down to, even though that was the game-losing interception to Darius Slay, what it came down to is the fact that the Rams, albeit they ran a pull with Jamon Brown at the goal line to the left side, and Todd Gurley went right up the middle, but Todd Gurley got, basically he got stopped at the goal line, and that was the end of the half, and that really changed everything because the Rams end up going into the second half with no points, and this is back in 2016 where it wasn't, you're going to get upset, obviously, as a Rams fan, but this is expected. I mean, you were used to calls like this being made, and Todd Gurley getting stifled at the goal line there kind of brought back some not so fond memories when you saw him at the goal line against the Lions, but he punched it in for the touchdown, and I just think in this game he was huge, and obviously the we not me approach with the whole, I wouldn't have run around the end zone crazy. Like it was Madden. It was bizarre, and it was actually risky because someone could have knocked that out, and if that goes out of the back of the end zone, as we know by the stupid rule, that's a touchback.
Well, Todd would tell you he's been through that before. It was the Seattle game last year. Yeah. Oh,
yeah. Yeah, no, that definitely, and that came down to a score.
Dolphins? What game was that? Anyway.
No, it was the Seattle game.
It was the Seattle game, okay.
Yeah, it was the one where Jared Goff forgot how to play football for 3 quarters, and in the fourth quarter he came out and was about to win the game, and Cooper Kupp dropped it. But anyway, Todd was great today, and it's one of the many reasons on top of what he's done this year overall as to why I would put him in the MVP conversation for sure. Jared Goff, however, was not. But those are my two things I wanted to touch on. I wanted to get you going because, I mean, I could go on for a while with Jared Goff. I was very aggravated, and there's reasons, but what were your if there's a guy that you would like give the game ball out to or a shout out, if there's anything like that, what would you say?
I think that it was good to see them respond. Once again, we get one of these games where they're the favorites and you expect them to win, and they're playing a scrappy team that makes some plays and sticks around, and they have trouble in the red zone. They can't convert, and it keeps them in the game. what was it, 16-13 late in late second or mid second half, and you like to see him kind of turn it on. I think they did go to Todd a little bit like they should have in the second half. He had 165 yards from scrimmage, and I really thought the interesting thing, they must have said something in the huddle once again. The Lions are out of timeouts, don't score, or it's one thing to not score and then be able to down it. It's another thing to not score and then try to score. Not score, make them use their last timeout, get it down under, and then score. So I don't know if he maybe shouldn't have done that. Like you said, it's a little bit riskier than, earlier this year where he did it at home and it was easy to laud him for it because they just kneeled and the game was over. This time it was kind of a new age sort of real Madden thing. And I think it's funny that you've got this whole new generation of kids who play Madden and can manage a game better than, a lot of these old coaches. A guy like Mike McCarthy, who got fired today, a guy like Andy Reid, really could kind of do well to, spend an off season playing Madden and learn how to manage the clock. But in terms of the game, I don't know if anybody really stood out. I liked how much they used Gerald Everett in the first half. I thought that was a good sign. I thought, for how little the Lions had, I think they scraped together and hung in there and got enough points and made some plays. And, when you're the Rams and you're in this position, it could be easy to kind of, start to look ahead to, getting the T-shirt and the hat and, winning easy and putting it on them. And, but you got to close it out. I think that the upside of this game was that they were able to close down the stretch. And overcome here's a question. Do you think this was Jared's worst game of the year? Because really the story of this game is that, Jared played the type of game that's going to get this team beat in the playoffs. And so you wonder kind of where that came from, if it was something Detroit did, or did he just get hit early and then get rattled a little bit? It's interesting that you get 3 MVP candidates on this team, and sometimes Jared has the good game and he looks like the favorite, and other times it's Todd and he looks like the favorite, and then AD does what he did, what he's been doing recently, and I think Rich Hammond wrote a story on him getting some MVP buzz. So I think that's going to be interesting to see over the next month whether the Rams are going to have one MVP candidate kind of come out, or if they're going to kind of start to step on each other's toes in that race, I guess.
Yeah, so I thought, as soon as this game was over, my first thought was, wow, Jared Goff just played his worst game since 2016.
Yeah, I think that's probably right.
To me, it's hard because I'm not trying to sound like a hater, but Jared missed some huge throws that made it necessary for the Rams to have to win on defense. And look, I know we see this a lot. The offense bails out the defense, but this was bad. This was similar to the game. It reminded me so much. You have a defense that is, an offense that's stalling in 2016, yes, can never get anything going, and then you go to New Orleans, you put up a 21 on the board for the first half, or the first quarter, with Jared Goff, a young quarterback who literally just started playing like last week.
That was his first game.
And then your defense just lays an egg. And to me, that's what I thought. It was reversed. And it wasn't on Todd Gurley. He had a great game. Wasn't on Brandon Cooks, who went over 1,000 yards. He's the first player in NFL history to have 3 straight seasons over 1,000 yards with 3 different teams.
Crazy.
So shout out to him. And 3 different numbers, which I just realized. So Brandon Cooks, Robert Woods, it wasn't his fault either. He had 9 targets, only reeled in 5 of them. There's a reason he only reeled in 5 of them. Tyler Higbee, he came away with a couple balls that, he had 3 targets, but he did his job for the most part. It was confusing to me how, Josh Reynolds, they started off the game, they targeted Josh Reynolds like crazy. And Reynolds looked like he was up for the challenge. And then it was like Jared missed him like twice after he caught 2 straight passes, and it was like, nope, we're not going to go his way anymore. Like, Jared missed the throw to Josh in the back of the end zone, towards the right side of the end zone. Jared missed a bunch of throws, honestly, and that was the thing. You know, the weird thing, Joe, is Jared's had games this year where I just can't call him the MVP because he's had those games, but the stats never indicate it. He's normally sitting there with the 20 of 26 line, 2 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. He's had 3 interceptions dropped in a game, or, you know, he has 300 yards or something. And that's the crazy thing. Today, it was like the stats showed exactly what I saw in the game. I mean, right. 17 of 33, 207, a touchdown interception. He only averaged 6, a strip sack. Mm-hmm. You know, he gave up 2 sacks, and honestly, I'm sorry, I'm crediting both of them to Goff. I saw people were defending him. I mean, that's fine. It's totally, you know, your call and everything. I'm not trying to sound hostile, because Jared's still a phenomenal, you know, long-term quarterback.
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay to have. But the other thing about it is you have a bad day. Sometimes, you know, the bad day can make you better. You know, there's going to be a lot of film that, you know, Sean can go to Jared and be like, hey, how about this one? This is what you do in this one. What about this one? You know, let's learn from this one. And I think that's, you know, this will make him better. And it's also a mental exercise. You know, how do you grind out a win when, you know, you've got the yips and when you're throwing wide and, you know, you're a mess, you know, with your feet, you know? I mean, I think that's, you know, not every game, you know, everything's going to go your way. And, you know, sometimes the ball's not going to go where you throw it. You got to figure out mentally how to fix it. So, you know, I think all in all, they didn't lose. So this is probably better than if he'd have gone out there and everything had gone his way and they had won by 50.
Yeah, and you know, I bring it up because, again, I'm not trying to sound hostile, you know, but on Twitter, it was like people were defending him for the sack he took that was a forced fumble. Look, you can take a sack. You know who was good at taking sacks and not fumbling the ball? Sam Bradford. Dude just got down. It actually aggravated you because you're like, okay, you easily could have made a play or thrown it away or something. Goff was like, that one play where Harrison rips the ball out, it was frustrating to me because he had a guy, I believe he had Robert Woods over on a crossing route towards the left sideline, and he just misses him, and that's fine. You know, he misses a guy. It's a fast game. It's one miss. I mean, he misses guys. It happens. The thing that aggravated me was people were saying he stepped up in the pocket. Let's be honest here. Jared didn't even know what Jared was doing. I mean, he had the ball and he ran into the trenches. Like, he ran in. It wasn't stepping up in the pocket. It was just he could have gotten rid of the ball, and he had time, and he then took away his time by running into traffic. It blew my mind, and then when he fumbled the ball, I was like, oh, here we go. I mean, the problem is you can't have these mental lapses when, you know, comes playoff time. And I think, I'll say this right now, you know, he gets away with some stuff because you look at last week, 54-51, and he threw the awesome throw to Gerald Everett. But I'm sorry, Jared Goff missed a lot of throws in that game as well. I will tell you right now, the best quarterback performance I've seen all year has been from Goff. The game against Minnesota was the best quarterback performance I had seen all year. That was absolutely flawless. And if the Rams get that Jared Goff in the playoffs, there isn't a team in the last 10 years that could beat them. And I mean that because he was absolutely flawless. And when you factor in the weapons he has, I mean, there's nowhere to go but up. But you got to at least mention when he doesn't play all that well. And I'm just going to be honest, I was not impressed with the way he played. And furthermore, it put the Rams in a bad spot. And unfortunately, it left people, you know, because we're always criticizing our defense, you know. You see it on social media. This linebacker's trash, this one's trash, this one. But oh, Corey Littleton gets a sack, let's go on mute and not talk about that. But, oh, Corey Littleton missed a tackle, so let's go at his throat. The Rams gave up 16 points, and in reality, I thought they had one of the best defensive games of the year. I mean, I know they give up 90 yards to Levine Toilolo, who is mainly a blocking tight end they got from Atlanta, but they held Kenny Golladay to 50. They gave up a touchdown to Taylor Decker. So the only touchdown they gave up was to an offensive lineman on a play where they probably should have realized when the Lions reported eligible for an offensive lineman that they were going to be throwing the offensive lineman. But regardless, I thought it was a pretty good day for the defense, and it was definitely a resume builder for Aaron Donald, who proved, even though Jared Goff played horrible, even though things didn't go the Rams' way as far as, separating from the Lions, Aaron Donald was able to kind of clean up the mess. He had 2 sacks. One was called back that he won't get credit for. He's actually had 18.5 this year if you count that one, and then the one that was called back against Derek Carr on Monday Night Football to start the season, which is incredible to think he might have 18.5 sacks right now. He was unbelievable in this game. I mean, I can't wait to go back and watch the film because, Joe, how many pressures do you think he had in this? I mean, he easily had double digits.
Well, never mind
from what
the fact
I
that
can
he had
remember.
How many TFL? 3-4 run stuffs in the. So I mean, he was living in the backfield, and part of it was, the Lions were missing some guys up, on the offensive line, and obviously, AD's going to beat up a starting offensive line. Never mind, some backups. So, when he gets those backup matchups, he's going to feast. But there's just one. I said it. I had a spot on Sirius XM before the game and a spot on TuneIn after the game, and the guys after asked me about AD MVP, and I was like, yeah, my argument is in a league where, yes, Patrick Mahomes is having a ridiculous year, but everybody's got a quarterback that's performing. There's really not a ton of difference between. You got it. Tom Brady's in the middle of the pack in terms of quarterback production this year. So you've got the greatest of all time in the middle of the rise is average, and so there's really not a ton difference between QB1 and QB20, but there's only one Aaron Donald, and he's giving you production that no one's getting. He's on pace to set the record for sacks for an interior defensive lineman. He's coming up on the all-time sack record, which, depending if he gets to play 16 games, he may break. So if he breaks Strahan's record, and this team's the number 1 seed, it's going to be hard to argue against him, being a legitimate MVP candidate.
Well, and you also, I totally agree, and you also have to factor in how many times Aaron Donald's had to bail out this team. I mean, and what's around him. I mean, they have a lot of big names that really aren't producing. I'm sorry, Mark Barron isn't playing very well. And he was he was top 10 in run defense last year at linebacker. You look at Marcus Peters, you look at Aqib Talib, who's barely played this season due to the injury. Marcus Peters has struggled. I mean, the Rams lost Kevin Peterson early on, so it's been Troy Hill, it's been Sam Shields, and LaMarcus Joyner, who we were talking about as a top 5 safety last year, has completely fallen off a cliff this year in production. John Johnson's played well. Aaron Donald's gotten some production behind him out of Corey Littleton. And Ndamukong Suh has played well, but at times Ndamukong Suh isn't as disruptive as the guy that they really wanted to sign. Michael Brockers isn't having one of his best seasons. So really what I get at this is when people want to make the argument against Aaron Donald, there's no argument to make against Aaron Donald. But you could easily make the argument against Drew Brees because, last week, Drew Brees, when they needed him, he folded under the pressure. And I love Drew Brees. This is not a knock against Drew Brees. It's just, this is what it comes down to. You're going to have to be nitpicky when you're talking about this many great candidates. Patrick Mahomes, 7 turnovers against the Rams and Patriots. Those are the 2 biggest games he's played this year, right, and he lost them both. So those are 2 arguments right off the bat against Drew Brees. But then I'm not done because Jared Goff today. Andrew Luck. So you scored 0 points against the hapless Jaguars. Jaguars were falling off a cliff. You were 6-5. This was a game you were given. I mean, this was a gift. You now have to play the Texans. The Colts fans were assuming they were going to win this game, and they didn't even put points up. So Andrew Luck's out of that conversation.
That was crazy. I got to watch that game. I can't believe that happened.
Oh,
they
it
were
was,
playing
it was
so
bad.
well.
Yeah. I think really from what I don't want to get too much into it, but from what I saw, it was Evan Boehm, former Ram, and Rams practice squad guy anyway, and Joe Haig. They were getting abused, and a lot of offensive penalties that stalled drives, and Andrew Luck just didn't play his best game. And people still forget, Jacksonville has a great defense.
Yeah, still legit D. True.
So, even though they're 4-8, they still have a great defense. Their offense is really bad. Although if they had Kessler play the whole year, they'd probably be in the playoff race.
Right.
Not because Kessler is amazing, but Kessler doesn't turn the ball over. So he basically manages the game. And in that case, if you just get a touchdown or two, that defense is good enough to win you games. But I don't want to go too off the rails there. So my point is, Luck kind of pushed himself out of the race this weekend. I would say Goff did. I would say, I'm not going to say Breeze completely did, but that was a big resume builder, and he lost that game against Dallas. I mean, he threw an interception on the last chance after they forced a turnover. And then, Patrick Mahomes, while that is nitpicky, again, you're talking about greats. You know what Aaron Donald's worst game was, arguably? The game against Seattle where he had 1 sack. No tackles for losses, no tackles, small amount of pressures. I believe he had like 5 or 6. That's his worst game of the year. So even at his worst, I mean, his worst is still the best in the league at his position. And furthermore, like you said with Tom Brady was the MVP last year. I thought Todd Gurley should have won it, but regardless, Tom Brady was in the MVP last year. This year, he's middle of the pack. Aaron Rodgers, we've seen it in the past. He's won. This year, I mean, he'd be really dark horse candidate because, I mean, he's been efficient, but he hasn't been Aaron Rodgers level. Russell Wilson, I think, is a dark horse candidate as well. But to me, it's every year, Joe. Oh, who's the best in the league? Tom Brady, Andrew Luck, Aaron Rodgers, Drew Brees, Russell Wilson, all these guys. You never question who the best defensive player is, and you never question who the most dominant player is, because right now there's no one as dominant as Aaron Donald, and that's my argument. And I think it's pretty easy to make that when you look at what he's done compared to J.J. Watt. I mean, J.J. Watt in 2014 had an unprecedented amount of votes for a defensive player. Going back, this century, no one has had as many defensive, no one has had as many MVP votes as J.J. Watt got against Aaron Rodgers. But that year, Aaron Rodgers threw 38 touchdowns, 4,000 yards. This year, there's a lot going up against Donald because we're talking about a guy that's possibly going to finish with 56 touchdowns in Mahomes. But to me, I think that there are things there that you can nitpick against. And with Aaron Donald, there's nothing you can say. What, the defense is bad? That defense isn't bad, so that's not true at all. They're not elite. And so I think this team gets penalized because they're not what we imagine they would be. They're not what we imagine Marcus Peters, Aqib Talib, all those nicknames that were made. They haven't lived up to that. But they're still not a bad defense. Well, they're not great, but they're not bad.
I mean, the way I look at MVP is you almost have to come from the team that's the number 1 seed. And, I know that's not the way other people see it. It's not the way the vote goes. But if I'm going to vote for an MVP, it's going to almost always be from the team that's the number 1 seed. Because I ask, who's the player that made the best team the best team? Obviously the guy who's most responsible for, the Rams being right now the best team in the NFL is Sean McVay. But besides that, I think it's a question between Todd Gurley and Aaron Donald. And last year I answered that question with Todd Gurley. This year, I would give it to, as of right now, I would give it to Aaron Donald because he's the most unique player In football right now, there's only one Aaron Donald, and that you're in a position where in a defense that, like you said, hasn't lived up to at least the hype. Although they've had their moments. They had the dominating game against Arizona. They had 5 takeaways and 2 touchdowns against the number 1 offense in Kansas City. And you're going to have an argument. If you're going to have an argument between Mahomes and Donald, who won the matchup? The Rams won the matchup. If I had a vote, if the Rams are the number 1 seed in the NFC and the Chiefs are the number 1 seed in the NFC, MVP has got to be a Ram. And so it really comes down to Gurley or Donald, and I think it's a tough decision. Last year I would have went Donald. Last year I would have went Gurley. This year I probably would go Donald.
Yeah, exactly. I would have gone Gurley last year, and this year I would have gone Donald. And I had that article I came out with, and I really I wanted to check it out because we always hear about J.J. Watt's 2014 season, and while I was alive and I was definitely watching football, it's easy to forget things like that. It's easy to forget how great Watt was and who he went up against. And it's actually funny because in that year, Joe, I actually saw Bobby Wagner got an MVP vote. So, little known fact. Through 11 games, Joe, before this game even started, Aaron Donald had 616 snaps. J.J. Watt in 2014 had 746. Aaron Donald had 5 more sacks than J.J. Watt did in a lot less, 130 less snaps. But even more, he had 7 more pressures. And, he had 6 less defensive stops. The tackles weren't as much as Watt, so he had 9 less tackles. He had more tackles for a loss. He had 2 less quarterback hits, more forced fumbles, 2 less fumble recoveries. Also, Watt played on the edge. So, again, it's one of those things. Like, Watt was considered... I think Watt was getting so much more buzz at the time than Donald is getting right now. And I don't know why that is. It's like, I don't know what else you could want. This is an 11-1 team that has won games solely because they have Aaron Donald to close them out. Like this game, the Rams do not win this game without Aaron Donald. The Rams also do not win this game without Todd Gurley. Jared Goff, I'm not going to start getting into that, do they win with Sean Mannion crap? But Jared Goff did not play well enough to win this game. And if he didn't get help out of, Aaron Donald, that forced fumble, this game probably ends up being an L. And that's the key here. Because you can look at the score, 30-16. Oh, what are you talking about? The Rams, they handled them. Did you watch the game? Probably the person that said that did not watch the game. Because momentum would have completely shifted if the Rams weren't able to stop them on that drive. The game's completely different. And the game was honestly different when Taylor Decker caught that touchdown. If you really think about it. That was what? That made it 16-13 or whatever. That was a momentum shifter right there. So, then they get a stop, and then the next drive, the Lions had a chance, and Aaron Donald swallowed that up. So, that's that just saying. And you're pretty much on that bandwagon with me. Now, Donald, he's looking at the record, and J.J. Watt didn't break the record the year he won he didn't win the MVP, but the year he was up for the MVP. He had 20.5 sacks. He also had 119 pressures. Aaron Donald's on pace for 112. Just the stats are comparable, but I think Aaron Donald is having a better year than 2014 J.J. Watt, and J.J. Watt really started to make a run at that award, and the Texans weren't as good as this Rams team either, So I do think, Aaron Donald wasn't catching touchdowns, so I'm sure that had something to do with it. Not as flashy, but, I don't know. Because, do you remember what the record was for the 2014 Texans?
Was that the year they were super good for like the first half of the year, and then they just they put on the varsity jackets against the Patriots and got crushed?
Pretty much 9-7. They didn't make the playoffs.
Yikes.
So I'm just saying that has to count for something.
Yeah,
You mentioned
MVPs. Your team again. MVP. It's not. You're not the player of the year. MVP. There's got to be some value to it. The team's got to be a good team. And that's why in basketball, I'd always, I'll go lead in the NFL. I'd go for the number one seed. I think that's probably why I was okay with the fact that a Ram didn't get MVP last year, because they weren't the number one seed. But this year, this team's 11-1. If they finish 15-1 and hold off the Saints for first, got to give it to when they have a win over the number one seed from the AFC. It's got to be a Ram. It's got to be AD.
I definitely agree. As biased as it sounds, you make it a little unbiased. But the point is, he's got a serious.
God, sorry.
What was that?
No, there's a rationale to it.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, am I supposed to be biased against my team? Because you're not going to lie about how good AD is. So it's hard when you have so many great players on this roster. It's like you don't want to sound biased or sound like a homer, but it's like, I'm sorry, the Rams are the only team right now that have 3 MVP candidates. And if you can't think of another one.
If this team loses to the Eagles or the Lions or the Bears, and the Saints win, get home field, then it's then I would have to vote for Drew Brees. They won head to head too. They beat you head to head, albeit at home. So
yeah, it's a stock game. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. I mean, for it. If Carson Wentz stayed healthy last year, he wins the MVP, no doubt.
Yeah, and they were weren't they the number one seed? Yeah, that's who I would have voted for. I almost would have voted for him. I was close to voting for him anyway. Because you could see how a mess they were, in the regular season without him. Obviously, they figured they used that time wisely and made the adjustments and, had their historic postseason run. But, you could see it in weeks 14, 15, 16, how much they missed him, what he meant. And I'll tell you right now, Carson Wentz still isn't himself. You tear your ACL like that, he's still, a year out. He's almost identical, almost exactly a year out, from his injury. So, I think he may, start to improve as he gets, a year out from his surgery. So that's the other thing. You're not really yourself when you have an injury like that, for at least a year. So, I think he's got some improving that could come down. I don't mean to hijack it, but bringing up him, remember how incredible he was that first half last year before he got hurt? The first half of the game against the Rams, they couldn't stop him.
Yeah, it's that was probably my least favorite loss, because even worse than the playoff loss, because as a Carson Wentz fan, or even if you're a fan of the NFL, the worst scenario for a Rams fan that likes Carson Wentz is to lose the game and injure Carson Wentz.
Yeah. Well, that was the thing, is that you had the game, you knocked him out, and so it felt like you won the battle, because it felt like you had dealt the Eagles a debilitating blow, but then you couldn't take advantage of it, and it was almost this double hit, because they, you felt like you should have won the game, you felt like you should have taken over and been in position to take over that number one seed, but you didn't do it, and that's the anyway, not to revisit last year, but
yeah, thanks, Joe.
It was
bringing that up.
It was a double hit, yeah, for sure.
This is one of the most mind-blowing stats for me. I still can't believe that the Rams, the last time they won their division in back-to-back seasons was 1978 and 1979.
Yeah.
With Ray Malavasi.
I think it was 73 through 70. Didn't they win the division like over and over and over again going into 79? No, they did, but that was like the last statistical. Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. It's been a long time,
but
man.
that's just that.
That's the Niners. It spans the entire Niners dynasty, and it also spans, that the great recent Seattle team. The issue is that, when you had your great teams in the beginning of this century, you weren't able to do. That's the interesting thing is that that they didn't win back to back to back in that period. During the greatest show on turf. So.
Yeah, because 1999, they win the Super Bowl, their first in the NFC West. 2000, they finished 10-6, their second in the NFC West. 2001, 14-2, they lose the Super Bowl to the Patriots, their first in the NFC West. 2002, 7-9, second in the NFC West. 2003, first 12-4. And then 2004 is 8-8. So it was this back and forth affair until they completely fell off a cliff. And it says a lot. I mean, Malavasi was an awesome coach. But it says a lot about, the stability with Sean McVay. I mean, I'm not trying to trash Martz, but the Rams had something with Dick Vermeil, and it just, whatever it was, it just left the building when he left. I mean, because he was originally going to retire, and then he went to the Chiefs, and then it's like he goes to the Chiefs, and he has Trent Green, and I remember when they beat the Rams 40-something to 10, and I'm like, wow, okay. So, yeah, I think we made the wrong decision there. Like, it's one of those tough things. It's the same thing with Mark Bulger. You have this young, talented QB, but you have Kurt Warner who's struggling because he had the injury. It's like, what do you do? They had a bunch of tough decisions, but they didn't really, even though they were tough, I mean, they didn't really pan out, and there's not really, you got to make the right decision, and they just didn't. And that's why, now is so important, because with Sean McVay, it's a sense of stability. It's a sense of, the fact he's come in and installed his own culture. It's a culture that, really everyone feeds off of. And I mean, the dude's 22-6. In 2 seasons, not even 2 full seasons in the NFL. 22-7 if you count the playoff loss, but 0-1 in the playoffs. I don't think that's going to stay 0 in the win column too much longer.
Yeah, good call.
Yeah, so I think that's pretty much it. I mean, you sent me some stuff, so I was looking through that. I was like, ooh, the Malavasi thing was really cool, and obviously Todd Gurley tying one of my Rams' favorite all time. I never got to see him run, but I always liked Dan Towler, and just looking at history and watching whatever I could find on him, he was just an absolute bull. And Todd Gurley ties him with 44 career rushing touchdowns on 4th place Rams all-time rushing touchdown leader list. And Jared Goff is already 10th in singles. Well, he had single season passing franchise history, but he's 10th on the all-time passing since he passed Bill Wade. And oh, look at this, he passed Sam Bradford for 8th place on the Rams all-time passing touchdown list. Well, that's gotta hurt, knowing Sam Bradford was there for much longer than Goff's been there.
Here's a little something, a little bit of news that we could discuss. Malcolm Brown gets potentially banged up. Who knows if it's serious yet? We'll find out this week. But if it's a situation where he's got to sit this week against the Bears, how excited would you be to get John Kelly a little bit of run? And I think at some point you got to get Kelly and Obo and maybe even Sebastian Joseph Day into the lineup late in the season. We talked about this last week, to get them some reps and maybe put them in a position where they can add some depth in the postseason.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point that you bring up there. I do have to commend Malcolm Brown, because he's just been awesome in his role. I think the Rams, because from what I was told by somebody that was at the game, they actually DM'd me and they told me that the Rams were going to use Pharoh Cooper as the backup running back if they had to, because he was on the sidelines taking handoffs. So, yeah, so it looks like Pharoh Cooper in that situation would have been the backup. I can't tell if he'd be the backup if those guys were active, because I believe, was Justin Davis inactive? I think he was.
Yeah. Yeah, it was just the two of them.
Kind of a surprising inactive. Normally he is active, but Davis and Kelly were inactive, so Pharoh Cooper would be the emergency backup running back. But it just makes me wonder if they weighed that beforehand, and that's why they went that route, because they feel comfortable with Pharoh Cooper as the backup behind Malcolm Brown. Because if not, then I think you do see Kelly and Davis kind of, basically alternate that role moving forward if Malcolm Brown has like a significant injury. Now, I think with Davis, I think he has the edge because he's already suited up this year, albeit he hasn't suited up in the offensive game. Right. But, I think he would have the edge. I think they might use Kelly in the passing game, try to see what they could do with him, get him, acclimated. But the problem is, Brown hurt. You only gain one spot, on a game day roster. So you would have to decide between Okoronkwo, Sebastian Joseph Day, Justin Davis, and John Kelly. Now, I think the Rams made a mistake today. I actually really like Matt Longacre, but I just don't feel as strongly about him starting as I do, with Dante Fowler. So I wasn't really huge, on that. But that's the thing, Joe. If you want to start these guys, you also have to figure out a way to, open up a spot for them on the active day roster, because the asinine rules that they have. Because you got 53 players on the roster, but you have to have 6 or 7 inactive. I just never understood that. But that's really what's the issue. I mean, I'm sure they would love to have everybody active. They just can't. So I like that you brought that up. I don't know why Tanzel Smart isn't inactive. I don't know how much better he is than, a Sebastian Joseph Day, but, that's either neither here nor there.
Yeah, I think Tanzel was inactive again today, too.
Oh, wow. He was.
I wonder where that spot came from. I'd have to look at who. Oh, you know what?
Well,
I can look right now.
Longacre
was active.
Inactive last week.
Yeah, he was active this week. That's what happened.
Yeah, this week, and then they added Talib.
That's what it was. So, yeah, the inactives were Williams, Davis, Kelly, Okoronkwo, Joseph Day, Munt, and Smart.
I'm rolling with 2 tight ends, dude.
Longacre, Westbrooks, Kaiser was active, Allen, Lawler. That's kind of the Hatfield. That's kind of the bottom of the 46. Brown, Countess, Hodge. You could short a receiver. Is Hodge the 5th or the 6th receiver? 6. Yeah, you have Hodge.
The problem is,
that's the thing. You have Hodge, Cooper, and JoJo. That's where the extra spot is going. So at some point, you got to say maybe sit Hodge or sit Natson and have Cooper have all the returns. That's where that extra spot's coming. So what you could do next week is you could rest Brown, and you could have Cooper take all the returns and sit JoJo, or you could have Cooper run routes and sit Hodge, and you could play both Obo and Kelly, or both Kelly and Joseph Day. So that's where the bottom of the roster decision's being made, I think.
Yeah, I think Kaderl Hodge is actually 4th on the depth chart, so I think it would be between Natson and Cooper, because Hodge he gets more offensive reps than Cooper does. Whether that's going to change or not, I don't know, but man, it's hard to take out JoJo Natson, but at the same time, it's like, Joe, I've lost all faith in punt returning, because it's just like he had that long punt return and they threw a flag after the fact, and it seems like there's always a flag thrown on a punt return. I just it's like I don't even. It's like, why even watch the punt return game? Yay! So some guy's gonna risk himself to get injured on a meaningless play every time. Like, every time. So, I don't know. That's kind of my thing. But, yeah, I guess we'll see. And I don't think it'll come this week, Joe, but I think when you move towards the games with potential blowouts, with the 49ers
right, the last 2
and
weeks.
Cardinals.
You got 2 weeks there where you could give some of those bottom of the roster guys a shot.
I think the Rams will quote unquote try to run it up just so they could get their guys out in the last game.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, you're hoping the Saints lose one of those Panther games or lose one more game, and then you've got a little bit of, then maybe the last game of the season you could chill out with. I think that's the issue.
And at the same time, it's like a blessing and a curse, with the number 1 seed, because you're not playing football for 2 weeks. So it's like, do you want them to just get out there and play? Because if they don't play, that would be brutal. That'd be a lot of time off. Your body's not used to that. They had a bye and, a lot of, I don't know. So I do think in some capacity the starters should play in week 17. I'm not all for entirely sitting them, but, if you don't deal with the bye correctly, you could actually have it hurt you more than it can help you.
Gotcha. No, I agree.
So I think that is going to do it for Jake Ellenbogen. He's Joe Curley. It's episode 139 of the Downtown Rams podcast. Hope you guys enjoyed, and we'll be back to cover the Rams and Bears game, because that'll be a fun game.
Yes.
It's prime time. It's going to be at Soldier Field, and man, if you were looking for a game that wasn't a game to just look over, man, Chicago, that's a fun game. I know Chicago lost to the Giants, but Chicago's still going to be a nasty defense to go up against. Huge test for the Rams, and again, what doesn't kill you only makes you stronger. So the Rams have a chance to get even better playing Chicago
that'll be fun
on the road.
Rams O against Bears D. I'm glad my fantasy teams will be on a playoff bye that week. It'll be fun. All right, cool, man. Good stuff.
It will. All right, guys. Take it easy, and we'll be back later.